All right, now let me put it on Twitter. There's my Insta account.
Representative Mayfield. I'm going to start at 6:15, so that's 2 minutes.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay.
I'm just shopping. Don't mind me.
Well, you didn't hear that. I said I wish I could.
Welcome to the Criminal Justice Reform and the Impact on Our Communities Forum. Tonight we have our founder and president, Anthony McIntyre, and Representative Rita Mayfield. We are going to discuss criminal justice reform and the impact on our communities. Mr. McIntyre?
Hello. Can everybody hear me? Hello.
I can hear you.
Okay. How's everybody doing? Trying to make sure that everybody could hear me before I got started. So thank you to Leah Hatcher, who is our new executive director here at Ant Mound Foundation. As she said, we're going to try and discuss a little bit more. I think they had a little something in the news that I heard about here lately. Some little minor bill, right? Criminal justice reform bill for the state of Illinois. I sort of liken it to, some people may not like me saying this, but to me it's big to almost in comparison to, in my humble opinion, to the criminal rights law, not criminal rights, the civil rights laws of the 60s. The impact that it's going to have on the state of Illinois, and honestly, in my opinion, I think it's going to ripple throughout the entirety of the country. Criminal justice reform is a truly necessary thing and endeavor in this country, mostly due to, in my opinion, the fact that minorities are disproportionately adversely affected by the criminal justice system. I think most people realize it. Many feel it, think it, don't want to necessarily say it, whatever their reasons are. So the fact that all of the particular political individuals and community organizations and just everyone who got behind this legislation and supported all of our representatives in participating and thereby voting and passing it, it's a big deal. Chief amongst them is our 60th District State Representative Rita Mayfield, who most of you know, and if you don't, well, here she is. Go Google her. You'll probably computer will never stop spitting up information, positive information. We are proud to have her here today, and hopefully she can, share a little of her insight on this process and how it all went, how it came to be. I've been hearing a lot of commotion about certain aspects of it, so we'll get into some of that as well. So Representative Mayfield, I don't know if you had sort of an intro as to how you wanted, what you wanted to express to the audience right now before we sort of get into some of the bullet points, if you will, the questions and or concerns of the community relevant to this bill. If you wanted to start out and say something, and then we'll get right into it.
Okay. Well, for those of you that don't know me, I'm State Representative Rita Mayfield. I represent the 60th District, which is Waukegan, North Chicago, with parts of Beach Park, Gurnee, and Wadsworth. I'm very excited to be here to have this conversation today. If you'd like to know more about me and my policies, I do have a website, Rita Mayfield 60. Feel free to just Google me, it'll pop right up. You can reach me at any time at my district office at 60thdistrict@gmail.com. My phone number is 847-599-2800. And again, I'm just very excited to do this. I have been fighting criminal justice reform and recidivism pretty much ever since I got in, following in the footsteps of my predecessor, Eddie Washington, who led the charge here in Lake County for the least of these. These are the individuals, who are returning citizens, who just, were having the most difficult times finding housing, jobs, and just other benefits. The fact that they had done their time, they were still stuck with a life sentence even after they had paid their debt to society. So I see this as just a very good thing that we've done. It's very historic, and I'm looking forward to even adding on even more to what we've accomplished so far.
Well, thank you for that. So we'll get right into it. I'm one of those guys who, most people that know me, I try not to talk about something if I don't know what I'm talking about. I have this quote by Sun Tzu, who The Art of War is the book, if people would go and look at it. He says, "He who wins the war does not decide with the biggest, the best military, it's decide with the best intelligence," meaning information. So it's always good to do your homework, research, and get into it. Otherwise, you're just spewing a whole bunch of emotion, and that's not productive when you're actually trying to make change. So we have a lot of facts that back up and support the reason and the need for this legislation and this bill to have been passed. So here we go. Representative Mayfield, you've been involved with criminal justice reform for a long time and have sponsored many bills in relation to it. How does this bill stand out from others you've sponsored is question number one. And what is the significance of this historic legislation? And how can we keep the momentum going in the fight for criminal justice reform in this state?
Well, and I'm glad you asked these questions because, this right here, this bill is historic. It really is. How does it stand out from other bills? It was an easier fight, and I know we've had, in considering that we had tremendous opposition to this particular bill, to say that it is an easier fight, is truly just an understatement. What we've gone through in the past, 4, 5, 6 years, just trying to pass anything dealing with criminal justice reform has been extremely difficult. One of the, we ran into roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. However, with this particular bill and with the legislation that we were able to file, everything started with 8 minutes and 46 seconds. When George Floyd called out for his mother, it was the call heard around the world. We received support in communities where we had never had support before. Mothers, women across the state of Illinois, they all stood up and they said, enough is enough. And through these mothers, through these women, that message resonated to their husbands, to their sons, to their brothers, and we were able to lock arms and march together and say, now is the time for change. Enough is enough. We've had enough. And that is what makes this legislation so significant and so historic, is because we've had these individuals, in rural downstate communities who've come forward and said, we're going to help you pass this. We're going to come forward and we're going to make a difference with you. We're not going to let you continue to do this fight on your own. So this wasn't, even though this initiative was an initiative of the Black Caucus, it was everyone. It was the white mothers, the Hispanic mothers, the Asian mothers, everyone came together and said, we're going to make a difference. We are going to fight with you for change.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So there are a few misconceptions out there about this bill. I think one of them, well, I'll just go through a few of them and hopefully you can just address them and put people's mind at ease, or maybe you'll confirm some of people's suspicions. Who knows? So let's just try that and see what happens.
Okay.
So one of them is that, so we're talking about cash bail, right? So this bill eliminates cash bail, if I'm reading that correctly. And one of the concerns that I've heard is that the elimination of cash bail will incentivize people to commit crime. What do you think about that?
There's simply no evidence for that. Those who commit crimes still have significant deterrent of a prison system once convicted. Changes to the cash bail policy are focused on ensuring that pre-trial custody decisions are based on the interests of public safety, not on an individual's ability, to have access to cash.
So maybe I should have started out a little bit earlier with maybe defining cash bail in the first place. So the Eighth Amendment, if you will, it addresses bail for an individual who is accused or alleged to have committed whatever crime. So the Eighth Amendment, in my humble opinion, has been used as a weapon against individuals who are accused of whatever. And we also supposedly have the right to go to court, go to trial, and until you are proven guilty, you're innocent until proven guilty. And what happens in the eyes of most is that certain individuals, mostly minorities, when arrested and accused of something, are giving a bond, a bail, that is so high that it pretty much guarantees that they'll sit in jail. And it's very clear that if an individual is on the streets, he's much better able to aid in his own defense, where if he's in jail, not as much. And what that does is it increases the chances that this person may be convicted. So bail was not meant to be a punishment, but some people would argue that it was meant to incentivize individuals to come to court. is there any proof that giving someone whatever number of bail is going to guarantee that they're going to come to court?
Absolutely not. Yeah, you know, you have people who post bail who skip all the time. Uh, if they're planning to skip, they're going to do it whether they, you know, whether you set a high bail or a low bail, it doesn't matter. That transcends all racial barriers, although it is mostly individuals who are not of color who you have the biggest risk of not returning back. And if that does happen, you know, we do have the ability to put warrants out for their arrest and then not let them out, you know, to deny them that freedom. But most people who that this bill would benefit are those low level offenders, you know, who will show back up for court.
Right. Another, I don't know if this is misinformation or if it's actually true, but we would all like to get your input on it. When you guys, and I think this is almost a teachable moment. Most of us went through school and we were told about the three branches of government, you know, executive, legislative, judicial. And the legislative branch, which is yours, are responsible for the writing of law. The intent behind that law is what you are able to speak to. Judges will turn around and interpret the law based on their best judgment, I suppose. Was the intent, let me say it this way. Some people feel like judges, as a result of this, they're going to be more empowered to actually make the determination as to what the bail will be for, and well, who is going to receive a bail. Has that empowered the judges at the expense of the defendant, if you will? And was that the intent when you all were writing it?
Okay, I think this is a misconception, so you're right. This is a teachable moment. The new process created in this bill actually gives judges less individual discretion than they have under a cash bail system. While judges may still make determinations about pretrial custody, the new systems requires that they base their decisions on the results of an evaluation of a defendant's threat to the public. So it's not based on whether or not they can afford to pay their bail or not, you know, does this individual have money? There is an actual evaluation that is done that says, is this person a threat to society? And if they are, then they have, you know, then that judge then has the discretion to either deny bail or to set a very high bail. But if a person is a low level offender, which as you look at our county building right now, that is full of Black and brown individuals, you know, who have committed petty crimes, who just simply did not have the money to get out. Those individuals are low level offenders and they're not a threat, and they should not, you know, be sitting in a county jail at the taxpayer's expense.
And what constitutes a threat to society?
Murder, harm to someone else, rape, abuse of a child.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, someone who's been charged with one of those crimes, because he's been charged with one of those crimes, that constitutes a potential threat to society that will trigger a judge being able to say, you know, we're going to hold you in jail while you fight this case.
Correct. Or to set a bail amount commensurate with that particular crime. You know, we have that issue right now. If you look at the Kyle Rittenhouse case, you know, his bail is $2 million for allegedly, you know, injuring and murdering two people. Whereas we have countless Black and brown individuals who are in jail for petty nonviolent crimes, you know, driving, you know, under suspended license. They're not hurting anybody. You know, somebody who got picked up, you know, before marijuana became legal, got caught with a dime bag and drug paraphernalia, you know, sitting in jail, risking them, you know, losing their jobs, their homes, their families, everything, simply because they are low income and they can't have Our current system is a two-tier system. It's the haves and the have-nots. Either you have the money to get out and be able to fight your freedom, or you don't, and you sit there and you lose everything while you try to, regain your freedom.
Because those consequences are real. If you're sitting in jail, it's more than just you who are affected, right? So if you were a breadwinner in your home has lost that income.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure that that would have a devastating impact on, your household. And that's a horrible thing. And I think that the consequences that come behind these decisions, I don't know if they were really thought out when they just put these people in jail. Do you believe
And can
that?
I just add to that?
Sure.
When somebody is sitting there in jail for long periods of time, simply because they can't afford their bail, this is where you see individuals who make false confessions. They just confess to a crime. They plead guilty, even though they didn't do it, just to regain their freedom. And we have to stop that. We have to stop putting these, X's on people's back. We have to stop, falsely persecuting individuals simply because they want to go home.
Do you believe that cash bail criminalizes poverty?
Do I believe it criminalizes? Yes, absolutely. It creates that two-tiered system I talked about, the haves and the have-nots.
Yeah.
Either you can afford your bail or you can't. Those, and I'm going to just keep bringing up the name, Kyle Rittenhouse. He posted $2 million bail after allegedly, injuring one and killing two. Look at Lake County Jail, and you have low-level offenders in there who have not harmed anyone, but they don't have the money to get out. So yes, there is a problem, with our cash bail system, a problem that definitely needs to be addressed.
So most people who know you and your colleagues who are responsible for this legislation, most would accept that there, and this is my opinion, my apologies to anybody else, but there's nothing anti-police about you, right?
Absolutely not.
Yet
I
there
believe in our
are,
justice system. I love my police officers. Our society could not function without the police. They simply could not.
indeed. So I think I would be doing everyone a disservice if I didn't also raise some of the concerns that law enforcement has put out. And I've spoken to a few of them. When I say a few, several of them, just sort of to get their take on things, because I hear a lot in the media about how law enforcement was just collectively opposed to this bill. So I wanted to know from them, like, really, what are you all concerned about? So I think, and if I misquote anything, please correct me. So one of the things that is a part of the bill is that it says that law enforcement must have on their body cams, right? Is that true?
Okay. We've been dealing with body cams for a while. This is not the first time that body cams came up. No one should be surprised that it was included in this bill, because all we did is add on to what was already out there.
Mm-hmm.
Prior legislation, it was permissible, that said that if a police department elected to use body cams, that everyone in that department had to have body cams. So all we did was expand that and say that now we've tested that out. We've seen that the body cams are effective in actually protecting the police officers, because now there's a documented record of what actually happened. So we expanded on that and said we want all police departments to utilize the body cams. So the body cams are not there to penalize the police officers or to do anything, against them. It is actually there to work in their favor and in the favor of the public as well.
And I think that's really a key point. I have this thing that I tell people when I'm doing some of my speaking engagements. Minority individuals, individuals who their income level is very low, who have a certain view of law enforcement. And I'm not anti-cop. I always tell people I'm anti-garbage, and I don't care where that garbage comes from, I'm going to be against it. So what I tell them is the same laws that you feel are meant to hurt you will help you if you know them. So where law enforcement is concerned, and for those people who are like really opposed to police, don't like police, I get it. You've had enough representations of police misconduct to justify the feeling, and we all can get it. Um, but to the law enforcement individuals, as you just said, this prevents you from being falsely accused of something, right? So if you are one of those people who feels like there's an attack on law enforcement right now and people will just make up stories about what you did or didn't do, you should be very comfortable knowing that the camera is going to pick it up both ways. And for those
Absolutely.
officers who have nothing to concern themselves with because they're not doing anything wrong, I don't really know what the big deal is. And that's what I've told all of the people that I've spoken to. Um, but that's my take on it. And it creates a little friction, but the friction seems to me to come from you're just used to things going a certain way. So now that things are slightly moving in a different direction, you're uncomfortable. But that doesn't
Right.
mean that anything is against you, if you will.
Exactly, exactly. And they really do protect our police officers. You have a lot of officers who do everything by the book. And like you said, it doesn't stop, a suspect or perpetrator from turning it around and saying that the police officer abused them. That camera is a neutral observer that defends the rights, of those police officers to say that, hey, no, he executed everything that he was supposed to do by the book. And this person, is just a liar. So it really does help them.
So now, one of the things that some of law enforcement that I spoke to had as a concern was the penalty. And if, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, if a law enforcement officer does not turn on his body cam, that is a class 3 felony.
I believe so.
hmm So now I'll tell you, when this was raised as an issue, internally I laughed, right? Because I said to myself, this is we're always told, when I say we, I'm talking about the people I represent in the community, the minority community, in most cases. Um, we're told that individuals have the big D word, discretion, as to whether or not they actually will indict or put you in jail. You look at the totality of the situation and you make a determination as to what you're going to do. So I was making the point, well, law enforcement has so long been used to having, in my opinion, a separate set of rules that basically now all you did was level the playing field. So now if you have done something that you weren't supposed to do, the full knowledge of knowing that you could be penalized in such a way should serve as a deterrent to you doing it.
Correct.
And the prosecutors would then have the discretion, maybe, about whether or not they slap you on the wrist or run you through the ringer. That's what we have to deal with every day. So to me, the playing field was just leveled. It wasn't put like in the favor of anybody. It's more so you level the playing field, and we all are supposed to be citizens of this country, created equal. I think that's what the Constitution says. So it looks like this will slightly balance the playing field.
Right. And I
Um,
just like to say, we're not asking, for these agencies that don't have the cams already, you know, one of the arguments that came up was that, they couldn't afford it. Well, we're not asking you to go out and buy them tomorrow. It'd be nice if you did, but we're not asking you to. It's a 4-year rollout. You have 4 years to get your act together.
mm,
4 years. And they're still pushing back.
right. So most people recall the Breonna Taylor situation. And for those who aren't aware of it, Breonna Taylor was, um, sorry, Breonna Taylor was shot. Police officers were um,
They had a
executing
no
a
knock
no-knock
warrant.
warrant um, for someone in her home, is what they say. So with that no-knock warrant, they did exactly what it says. They did knock. They went in and inside the home, allegedly, Brianna's boyfriend was there, and I guess he thought somebody was coming in, a burglar or whoever was coming in, and the inevitable happened, and Brianna was killed. So, if I'm not mistaken, this bill would sort of make it very unlikely that something like that could happen. At minimum, now when police execute a warrant on a location, they must have their body cams on. If they don't, that's sort of very problematic for them. Is that also true?
Yes, let me just preference my answer. I want to give a shout out to Yashin Intern Phillips, who did the docu-social film No More in response to Breonna Taylor. It is a very moving piece if you have an opportunity to see it. So I just want to give her a shout out for doing that, because she really rallied pretty much all the women, the young teenagers in our community around, what happened to Breonna Taylor, and to say, what, we as women, we need to stand up for each other, and we're not going to take it anymore. But to answer your question, the intent of this bill is to rebuild trust with law enforcement after what happened in the Breonna Taylor case. And that begins with accountability. In this case, you can't have one without the other. You need the accountability. Breonna Taylor's case was a particularly egregious example of police using deadly force when it was entirely unnecessary. There's no question that the actions of the officers, would have been prohibited under this new law, and that officers, serving the warrant as they would on an individual, involved in a drug sale or something like that. But under this law, deadly force would have never been an option. So they would not have done, she would still be alive had this bill been in place, basically. I just want to put that out there. So witnesses in the Breonna Taylor case stated that the police did not identify themselves before shooting. Under this law, requires that the police identify themselves. It goes a little bit further by clarifying the use of bodily force to prevent an individual from escaping. That's in this bill as well. So we do want to provide, protections for law enforcement, but at the same time, we want to protect the individuals too. So it's trust and accountability. Individuals need to be able to trust police officers, and police officers need to be accountable for their actions at the same time.
Absolutely. Is it also true that this bill addresses and actually penalizes law enforcement for lying in statements?
That should have always been there. That goes back to accountability and trust. Police cars used to say, to protect and serve. They don't say that anymore. Their number one job is to protect, to sustain life, to serve the community. And if you have police officers, and there are a few rogues out there, but there's a lot of really good police officers who are out here, dotting I's, crossing T's, and doing their job, risking their life every day. But it's those outliers, those few bad apples, that are making it so difficult for those good police officers to do their job. You shouldn't, a police officer should be someone that you can trust. And if their words, if they come back, they want to turn off their police cam so that you can't see them violating someone's rights, well, that person probably shouldn't be a police officer. They may need to rethink, their profession. If they feel that they have to lie to justify their actions, maybe they need to rethink their position.
Understood. I guess in that vein, qualified immunity was it's always been a big deal in this country. Could you explain qualified immunity?
Okay, qualified immunity basically says you can't sue a police officer, and I think we talked about this, and I guess we can add on, because this also goes to prosecutors. You can't sue your prosecutor either, no matter how egregious, some of their actions are. But in regard to police officers, it doesn't matter what they do. They're basically excused for it, because most of it's considered that it falls under, them doing their job. And it's a problem. We removed it from this bill because it was such a heavy lift. We had just too much opposition, and it would have killed a lot of the good components of this bill. That does not mean that it is a dead issue. We will be revisiting that. Qualified immunity is one of the roadblocks activists have encountered, when we deal with police involved killings. And there have been quite a few of those. But yet, no matter how you capture the police on camera, even in the George Floyd case, kneeling on Floyd's neck, that's not part of their training. They know not to do that in their training. He violated his police training when he knelt on George Floyd's neck and he killed him. But yet, because of qualified immunity, you can't sue him. They didn't fire him. That's a whole nother issue, even though he was in clear violation of what he should and should not be doing. So there's a lot of advocates out here. There's still a lot of stakeholders who are pushing for this. We are going to refile a separate bill to deal with qualified immunity reform legislation and continue working on this area. That conversation, is ongoing. And I don't want anyone to think that, we dropped the ball on that particular pace, and I just want to alert, to our law enforcement that, this is eventually going to come. There's still a call for a lot of individuals who are saying, police officers need to, Kwame Raoul, our state's attorney general, wants to licensure police officers so they cannot keep bouncing from one department to the other, with starting over. You do abuses here, then you quit, and then you go to the next department before you get fired, actually. And then you do the same things here, you're abusing the public, and then you move. No, we're going to put a stop to that. Your record is going to follow you, and you're going to have to certify that, that this is really the right profession for you. Others have to certify, police officers should certify as well, and QI is coming back.
So for those people who do feel like you guys sold your soul, if you will, by removing qualified immunity from this bill.
I fought to keep it in. I was willing to go down kicking. I'm like, leave it in. Let's call it for a vote. I want to know who's going to vote against it.
Right. Yeah, that's a big deal. But in the end, you guys chose to get what you could, if you will, for now, and come back and get that fight later, for the most part.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. This has been a lot of the things that are in here have been ongoing fights. We've been fighting these things, the body cams, we've been fighting that for a couple of years. Mm-hmm. So these are not things that are, were easily done. Cash bail, that was a heavy lift. We've been, pushing for that for years. So the conversation continues.
Right.
This is just the beginning. There are still a lot of other reforms that are needed.
Absolutely. So again, so that everybody knows, law enforcement, for those people who feel like law enforcement, that they don't live by a different set of rules, I think where qualified immunity is concerned, you really get an opportunity to see evidence of it. Like I said in the beginning, there's facts are stubborn things. They don't go anywhere. So the fact is that most people outside of law enforcement, if they violate your civil rights, which you clearly can see, you have the option of suing them. But in actuality, where law enforcement is concerned, they have qualified immunity, which prevents you from doing that. Even in a case where you can see very clearly on TV, someone having a knee on their neck to the point where they aren't breathing anymore and they're begging for their mama.
Right.
Now, how sad is that? Now, I was just saying the other day that in my opinion, one of the reasons that the civil rights legislation of the 60s was passed was because people had an opportunity to see on TV the dogs biting the women and kids and whatnot. And until America was able to have a mirror put in front of itself to show it what it looked like to the world, they pretty much were shamed into passing that legislation back then. And I think, to me, and in most people's minds, George Floyd was one of those situations where we thought, I mean, did we really just watch a police officer
Kill
murdered.
this man in prime time, absolutely.
And did we also just watch, which is a segue, did we also just watch other first responders, including cops, watch it and do nothing about it?
And did nothing. They literally stood by knowing that what their fellow officer was doing wrong. And see, that's what's wrong with this so-called blue code. You know, if the blue code needs to be revised so that you are calling out, you know, your fellow men and saying, hey man, you know that's wrong. Don't do that. Or here, man, you know, let me take over in this situation. You know, you're not responding adequately. They're not doing that. It's almost as if, you know, those that stood around, they rubber stamped it. They are just as guilty as the one who had their knee on his neck.
Yet we see what the outcome was. And that shows the difference between men in uniform and law enforcement and everyone else. So I think
Absolutely, because if you were to kneel on someone's neck and there were 3 or 4 people standing around, you would be accused and all of them would be accessories to the fact. So it is no different. They are all guilty.
yeah. And I think you know, there are people within law enforcement who most likely they want to speak to some of this stuff, but I think they ask themselves, well, if I tell on him, because that's how they'll see it, then I'm going to be out there by myself on a call somewhere, and who knows what's going to take place. So hopefully somewhere within the police department, they'll make it easier for people to actually address clear wrongdoings without having to fear for consequences.
Right.
From their
Retaliation of the fellow
Yeah.
police officers.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
I guess I'm fast forwarding to a degree, right? Because the day that this bill passed, I received a number of calls from individuals, state reps, and one particular senator who had started already to receive death threats. Could you speak to basically that part, the ugly part of what goes into what people like yourself do? And it's there are a number of people who most likely don't participate in this process because of that. But for you all who stood up and stood firm, even in the midst of those threats, but I really just wanted to get your take on how do you feel about that?
You know, it was very saddening and it really, it never should have happened. For those who are watching and don't understand, let me just explain. The sponsors of the bill and several Black Caucus members received death threats from law enforcement. I'm going to say that again. They received death threats from from law enforcement officers. Individuals who swore to protect and serve were calling and saying, if you go forward with this bill, you had better watch your back. You had better watch your family. They threatened their families, their wives, their children. Come on, you don't do that. There is nothing in this legislation that would warrant anyone's life being taken from them. And for law enforcement of all entities to do that, that was, you know, it just made no sense at all, you know, to the point where, and I'm so happy for the mayors in those particular cities, for those representatives who reported it, you know, who provided protection to them. You know, and it's a shame when you have to have one cop, because it basically you put the good cops against the bad ones in those situations where the mayor said, I want you to go out here. I trust you to, you know, to protect these lawmakers should any of your colleagues want to step out of line. Why in the world should we have to protect individuals from cops? You should not have to. That is where you know we have gone the wrong way, and that something needed to be done to rein in some of these rogue officers. I think this bill, this historic legislation, is basically a light being shown on some of these departments, on some of these individuals, and it is a wake-up call for those rogue police officers to say, this may be your time to retire. You may need to look for another profession because we are not going to continue to allow you to abuse the citizens, you know, of our state.
So you made a slight point earlier, but I guess I want to highlight it a bit. Police misconduct, whether it be lying on a defendant, you know, planting something on a defendant, that's police misconduct that can easily cause, if proven, that case to be dismissed. But prosecutorial misconduct, which has the exact same effect, lying on someone, encouraging someone else to lie, prosecutorial misconduct is not a part of this bill. And they basically have the same immunity that you're describing when it comes to the civil component. But at what point is what a prosecutor or a police officer do criminal? Forget the civil part. What about the criminal part?
Well, the question there is who's going to say that it's criminal? Are you going to have another prosecutor come in and say that what, you know, prosecutor A did was criminal? No, it's never going to happen. I had a case early on when I started off as a rep. I had a mother come to me, the state's attorney at that time, and I'm not calling out any names. Basically, her daughter had been molested. And rather than sending the individual to jail, he cut a side deal and allowed that individual who molested her daughter to walk. And when she came to me, she asked that, you know, we knew we couldn't do anything about that particular case, but she wanted to protect individuals going forward, that next young girl who gets molested, you know, and to ensure that no deals are cut on their behalf, but that the perpetrator goes to jail. So we wanted to create a cause of action against prosecutors, you know, who do these type of things. And I can tell you that that bill was met with some of the most fierce, you know, opposition. It was just ridiculous. I was receiving just some of the worst phone calls, just downright nasty, you know, because of what had happened. And even though I was explaining to prosecutors across the state, you know, that particular case and why we were bringing the bill, they said they didn't care. And I'm like, excuse me, you don't care that a young girl was molested and that her perpetrator got off, but yet you run for this position. This is an elected position. You put yourself out there as being, you know, that individual who's going to stand up, you know, for those for the victims. And yet you're re-victimizing our young girls. And they're like, well, we don't care. We're not going to support your bill. We're going to fight it, you know, tooth and nail. And they did. They absolutely did. So this has happened. You saw in the case in Chicago, who was it? Burgess? Was that his name?
Yes, Lieutenant Burgess.
And they tortured individuals, literally tortured them into confessions. You know, Chicago was still paying those lawsuits out. You saw what happened, you know, in the Brooklyn 7, you know, with those individuals, you know, the Brooklyn Park 7, where the prosecutor, you know, fabricated, you know, and used their power to, you know, to get these false confessions and sent these individuals to jail for crimes that they didn't commit. It happens. It absolutely happens. And more times than not, it happens to low-income individuals, primarily our minorities.
It really does give you pause to ask yourself, you know, why would certain people seemingly not understand why there seems to be so much vitriol towards law enforcement. Now, I will tell everyone that the best thing to do, because if you think about it, for those people who don't believe that voting matters, this is one of those times that you get a chance to see where it actually does. Because the individuals who were voted into office, the ones who supported this legislation, if not them who were in those positions, I wonder if people really think that this would have happened. And I think it's very important that people recognize that this is huge for a number of reasons. Again, it's not designed, in my opinion, to allow people to just run rampant in the streets, which again is one of those other misconceptions, that this is going to allow for, you know, rapists and pedophiles to just run around and, you know, it's the wild, wild west and, you know, the police are just going to say, I just go ahead and do whatever you want to do. It's
That's
not that.
absolutely not going to happen. That is not the intent of this bill, and there's no language in this bill to that effect. So no.
Exactly. Um, the So there was a case here recently where, and it was local, you would remember it, where a few kids came into the area, something to do with them getting a car that wasn't theirs, and went to someone's home, and homeowner comes out, shoots a gun, one of them ends up dead, and the rest of the people who were involved were charged with murder, felony murder. Could you explain felony murder to the public and what changes took place as a result of this bill in reference to felony murder?
I'm not sure I can explicitly explain felony murder. You probably could do that better than me, but I can tell to the bill's aspect of felony murder. When you're talking about, changes to the felony murder law, there's a lot of partisan misinformation about what it really does. But what happens in this bill, the felony murder rule remains intact. Got a little tongue tied there. Let me say that again. The felony murder rule remains intact. Too many R's. Our current law, let me see, our law currently, I'm trying to figure out how to say this, but bear with me. So under the current law, individuals receive a maximum sentence when they should have received a low-level offense. And I hope I'm saying that correctly, because this was an aspect of the bill that I was not really clear on, so I had to do some research myself. The new law appropriately limits the application of the rule, so if the persecutor shows a defendant's intent to commit a violent act and resulted in a person's death, that defendant will be convicted of felony murder. Lower level crimes where the intent of murder is unclear will no longer be eligible for this sentencing enhancement. So another way of looking at this, because I know this is felony murder law, but accountability also feeds in here as well, because there's a lot of Black and brown individuals who have been convicted under the theory of accountability, even though there was no clear murder intent, or they may not have even been present at the murder.
Right. So in a hypothetical, because some people are visual, they need analogies. So in a hypothetical where you have, say, 5 people who go to steal a TV out of a home.
Right.
And in the process of them going to steal the TV out of a home, you got 2 or 3 of them just there. One of them didn't even know what was getting ready to happen. He was just there.
Right. They just picked him up along the way. Come on, man, get in the car. Right.
Exactly. 2 of them was just trying to, smoke a little weed for free or whatever. And they all went. Now, one of them went to the home. They didn't even know that it wasn't his home until they saw him break the window. And then all of a sudden, he don't realize the homeowner's there. Homeowner comes out, get away from my home. And he shoots. And he shoots one of the ones who was out by the car, kills him. The other 4 people had no understanding of what was going to happen with someone dying. They didn't even realize that somebody was trying to steal a TV.
Right.
Well, under felony murder, the fact that anyone died during that crime of somebody trying to steal a TV, everybody can be charged with murder under felony murder. So what this legislation, what this bill is saying, if I'm understanding it correctly, it's saying that if those other 4 or 5 people weren't actually participating in something connected to the murder, then you're going to focus more on what they were there for. And only that. You're not going to.
That is correct. You could charge them, with attempted burglary or something along those lines, exactly, which is a different charge than a murder charge. Absolutely. So yeah, you're saying it right. You explained it better than me.
I wanted to help you out a little bit. But I think that's very important for people to understand, because felony murder is ugly. I mean, it's ugly. You really are penalizing people for ignorance or, you know, whatever else that you're penalizing them for. And this is just simply saying, you know, because some people would argue, well, again, you're putting a bunch of people to putting them back in the streets. No, if you were committing a crime and that crime was to steal a car or steal a TV, you'll get whatever you got coming for that. But what you shouldn't receive is if a sentence for stealing a TV is 3 years, you shouldn't get 50 because you're charging this person with something that,
Or life.
or life. Yes.
We have several individuals who are currently serving life and they didn't kill anybody.
Wow. Well, I think to me, what I hope, and after I say this, hopefully we'll get the team to come in with the next part of this presentation. But to me, this process of the way people are viewing this bill, it sort of reminds me of some of the stuff that was going on during the last administration. And it looks like one of the greatest things that you can do if you're trying to accomplish something nefarious is to sort of pimp people's fear. And if you can paint a picture that everybody is sort of anti-police, then you'll create an uproar and people will come out and they'll, in an ignorant way, they'll get out and they'll do whatever you're looking for them to do. My hope is that forums like this, and mind you, I tell everybody this, what we're doing right now, it could have gone better strategically. I'll be the first to admit that. We'll get better as we go. But the point is that the information that we're putting out is real, is true, is tangible, something that you can touch. And my hope is that you'll hear something here tonight that you will go back and maybe do a little bit more research, homework. Maybe some of the people in law enforcement will hear this and say to themselves, you know what, this really isn't as bad as I thought it was. You know, we really do have individuals in the community, nonprofit organizations like Ant Mound Foundation. We do have people like State Representative Rita Mayfield, who they're not beating us up. They're simply trying to encourage us, law enforcement, to be fair. And if we do that, then we can get back to a point where, you know, young people who today, you know, I work with a lot of young people, they don't dream anymore about being a policeman, a fireman, or whatever. That's not where they are, because the narrative has been such that, man, you people trying to hurt us. So it's not that everyone believes that, but it's our hope that bills like this will minimize the opportunity for those amongst you to take advantage of this population.
The intent of this bill, and I just want to keep saying this, it is not to allow criminals to run rampant in the streets. There is nothing in this bill that does this at all. There are still protections for homeowners, for constituents throughout the state. This bill does not allow criminals to run rampant. What this bill does, it starts the rebuilding of trust between law enforcement and the community. That trust has been shattered through so many different incidents. You know, this is an opportunity for them to, you know, to get back to where we were, to where, you know, back in the day when we had the beat cops, those individuals who would walk the neighborhoods where they knew everybody's name in that neighborhood, and that, you know, they were greeted friendly. Hey, how you doing, Officer John? How are you today? We want to get back to that, to where our children are not afraid to approach law enforcement when they're scared or when they're hurting or when there's something going on that's not quite right in the home. We don't have that right now. Nobody wants to call the police because, as Anthony stated, you know, the police, they hurt people. That is not how we want our police to be viewed. We want them to be viewed as that person that you can go to for help. That's what they're there for.
Absolutely. I'm going to have a few more conversations with some in law enforcement, just so they know, you know, for those people who, we, the average people in minority communities don't want to feel like they owe law enforcement an apology for being upset. There's a whole lot of reason for being angry right now. Um, and the weird thing is, no matter what anyone says, when you see a wall, you know it's a wall. You know black is black, white is white. Those are real. It's not no ambiguity involved in that. So for those people within the ranks of law enforcement, the prosecutors' offices around this country, um, you know right from wrong. I mean, you know that you shouldn't plant drugs on someone, whoever it is. You know you shouldn't put a gun on someone. You know that if you didn't see this person, um, or this person didn't actually tell you that he did something, that you shouldn't write a statement saying that he did. I mean, right is right, wrong is wrong. My hope is that no people will get away from trying to meet quotas within law enforcement. I'm hoping that people won't be promoted based on how many you arrest. Um, those people who feel like, you know, one of the downsides to bail reform is that less people will be in jail. And if less people are in jail, jails will receive less money. And as a
Can I
result of
speak
that,
to that?
yes.
Because jails are, there is not necessarily there'll be less people in jail. Jails, there will be less low level offenders in jail.
Mhm.
That opens up, those cells, those cages, whatever you want to call them, for the true criminals. Let's put the true criminals away and make our streets safer and
Mhm.
allow those low level offenders, to pay their fines and to go on with their lives.
Yeah, it's funny when you say real. Really, in many cases, I think the numbers are somewhere around 85, 86% of individuals who are incarcerated. The charge that they've been convicted of, or should I say accused of, has an economic root. If you think about most of the charges that people have in jail, whether it be selling drugs or burglarizing a home, is economics at the heart of it.
Absolutely.
And with that being said, hopefully we can come up with some better options and alternatives besides prison for some of what these individuals are allegedly involved with. Some of these guys and girls are addicted to drugs. They more so need rehab than they need a prison sentence. And I think that part needs to really be taken into consideration because it's widely known. And unfortunately, we get to a point where people they utilize whatever their personal beliefs are and they carry it over into their jobs, and that can be quite harmful. Um, Now we have the last part of tonight because we're pretty much at our closing point. Um, so we have a grant that we received at the foundation from New Leaf. That grant it wasn't but for $5,000. It was our first one that we've ever gotten, so we're pretty pleased by it. And plus, we can make $5,000 do what it do. We'll make it work because the people that need us and what we provide in the community, that money goes a long ways. So we had here recently cannabis legislation that was passed in the state of Illinois, which legalized marijuana. Um, that pretty much was a big deal in the eyes of a lot of people because many people were adversely affected by marijuana laws around the country. A
There's
lot of
yeah.
people feel like marijuana is just as normal as drinking. Not to say that I agree or disagree, but the argument is there for that. Uh, Internet connection is unstable. So I just wanted to ask a few questions that came to us and see what you think about it. Um, I don't know if you're able to answer this, but do you know how, because technically you still can't drive a car under the influence, whether it be alcohol or any other intoxicant. How, do the police have a way in which to measure how much someone may have been consuming in the form of marijuana?
No. That's the simple answer. Abbott is working on a device similar to a breathalyzer
Mhm.
that will tell you basically how much is in a person's system. And based upon that test, you know, if it's a really high level, then a police officer would be able to reasonably state that that person was under the influence because you can only have that much in your system if you had consumed within the last hour, last half hour. So, but they're still working on that.
Mm.
There is no true measurement right now. I mean, unless you're just driving, you know, swerving down the street, you know, or there have been cases where individuals who have been under the influence sat at a stoplight, mesmerized by the changing colors of the stoplight, you know, from red, yellow, and green. So those are kind of indicators that maybe that person should not be driving. However, if you are caught with marijuana in your car, you can still be charged. It needs to be sealed in an odor proof and child resistant cannabis container, and you can buy those at the dispensaries. You cannot smoke cannabis, you know, in front of your children. You have to do that in a room absent of children, or you can be charged. And I think that's very important because, you know, you see a lot of people lighting up with kids in the room. You absolutely cannot do that, and you will catch a DCFS case. So I want to be very clear on that.
You know, it's really weird the way this country works a little bit sometimes because so mathematically, statistically, alcohol kills more people than all the drugs, but it's legal. Um, so it just makes one pause. Like, are you trying to say we want to ensure that we are putting rules and laws in place that are designed to minimize harm to either yourself or other people around you? In the case, like you said, your kids, whatnot. So,
If I drink a beer, it doesn't affect my child. If I smoke a blunt in front of my child has that same, they can get that contact high. So you are essentially getting your child high. So there is a difference between the two.
until you bring a cigarette into the conversation,
Well, we're not, yeah, cigarettes is a whole nother, that secondhand smoke, ooh.
and
That's
that's
why
and
what, cigarettes are $6 a pack now?
yeah,
Right, you know,
some
we've been
would
trying
some
to
would
work
argue
on cigarettes for a while.
that that secondhand contact that we're talking about with marijuana is no different than it is with cigarettes. And
Absolutely.
because that argument is there, and you put it on the scale, it seems like money is the determining factor there. So now that marijuana is legal, I guess it takes us to is marijuana has marijuana been taxed? And if it has been taxed, then the question becomes based on the intent of the legislation, is the money that is coming from the taxes on marijuana being utilized in the communities that were most adversely affected by the war on drugs?
Okay. Yes, we are taxing marijuana. Yes, there are literally millions of dollars that are coming in from the sale of marijuana. That money was supposed to go to minority communities, low income communities. You know, there is called the R3. You know, restore, reinvest, and renew. You know, and it's supposed to provide equity funding and grants and communities of colors like us. They just did the big rolling out of the R3 grants, and I'll tell you that 90% of that money went to Chicago. Okay, so is it being equitably put out into the community? I'm going to say no, you know, not with the majority of it going to Chicago and to, you know, large organizations into Chicago, not even, you know, to the small non-for-profits who have boots on the ground that are doing the work. They didn't receive the money, and that's where the money should have went. That was my understanding when we passed the legislation and when they talked about the R3 and this business development and all of this other, that they were going to be putting money into these small nonprofits, into creating businesses in Black and brown communities. That absolutely has not happened yet.
And that's again, when talking to young people and you're trying to make them understand this system that we have, and this whole concept of all men are created equal, it almost looks like the haves get more and the have-nots just continue to stay have-nots. As I
And
was
that's pretty
told,
much it. If you look at who got the marijuana licenses,
yeah,
you know, when we did this, there was supposed to be this equitable dissemination of licenses. However, the majority of the individuals who received the licenses are Caucasian.
Mm.
And they're operating in minority communities. That was not supposed to happen. How is it that, you know, you have particular law firms who helped devise the legislation, and now all of their clients are scoring 100%, you know, and everybody else is like 40, 50%. It really makes you wonder, you know, what is really going on behind the scenes? Because to me, I'm going to tell you that the system is crooked, and everybody that received a license in the last year needs to have those licenses revoked, and we need to start over, because there's no way that you can have all of these entities that are not from Illinois come into Illinois, and all of a sudden they get all of the licenses. They're all Caucasian and they get all of the licenses. I'm sorry, except for one. I believe there was one African American who received a license, but he was partnered with a Caucasian. So there's a problem there. There's a definite problem. And now they want to do more legislation that says, well, we don't like where we set up. We want to move into even better neighborhoods where we can get even more money. Now, they've already made millions, but they're getting greedy. They want to make sure that by the time that we get around to giving licenses to Black and brown and other low-income individuals, that there are no spaces left, that they're going to continue to receive crumbs. So yes, it is haves and have-nots, and they still want us to accept crumbs. I'm not accepting crumbs. I'm saying let's throw it all away. Let's just, you know, start over. You know, I'm willing to pull licenses from everybody and start this whole process over.
yeah, and I know that you have a an open line to Governor Pritzker. I'm curious as to how this happened, because Governor Pritzker during the his campaign, this wasn't a part of the plan as I understood it, and it just makes me wonder: is it something that he has control over, or is it the system, if you will, the way we talk about systemic racism, or whether it be systemic racism as part of the criminal justice system or the education system? Is it something that he neglected to take seriously, or is it something that was out of his control that allowed for what looks to be something so totally lopsided that benefits more of the haves as opposed to the have-nots? But that wasn't the intent. There is no equity involved with this. And I guess the question becomes, how could that happen? And for those people who are in these positions, how could you not have known?
Well, I won't say that they didn't know. I would say that this was a case of, you know, taking care of your friends. There are a lot of, you know, these are millionaires taking care of millionaires. You know, they knew the right people to call. They knew which phone numbers to dial to get, you know, their licenses done. And, you know, the average person, if you wanted a license, do you know who to pick up the phone and call in the governor's office to say, you know what, can you help me push my license through? I scored an 80% and I see these other people getting 100. What are the answers to the other questions so I can get 100? Come on now. How is it that there is one particular law firm in Illinois, they wrote the bill and all of their clients got licenses? That's a direct conflict of interest there, but yet nobody wants to call it that. You know, I don't have any problem calling it out, because to me, there's a problem here. And I don't want to use the word fraud, but there's a problem here. There's a definite problem here where these individuals receive licenses when they probably should not have. And it was because of who they knew and who knew how to manipulate the system. And they didn't benefit anyone of color.
Wow. Um,
So ask me how I really feel.
well, I definitely appreciate you holding back. It looks like there's a question for you from the audience. Um, so Representative Mayfield, this came from Megan. She said, for additional marijuana legislation, we need resources for education and outreach in immigrant communities because consuming or making money off of marijuana, even though it is legal in Illinois, can negatively impact people's immigration status.
Absolutely. Well, that's where, I talked about that R3 grant. That
Mhm.
R3 grant was open to all minority communities. Waukegan, North Chicago, Round Lake, Mundelein. They were supposed to take these marijuana dollars and invest them into nonprofit organizations so that we could, have a betterment of our community. The money went to Chicago. We didn't get that money out here, and I know there were several organizations in this area, both black and brown, that applied for those dollars, and I saw some of their grants that they wrote, and I'm still scratching my head trying to figure out why we didn't get them, but yet these large major organizations in Chicago did.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm familiar with Megan, and there's no reason that your organization shouldn't did not receive money. You absolutely should have received money because that was the intent of this legislation.
So for those individuals who have marijuana convictions in their backgrounds, the expungement process is one of the things that New Leaf is, really adamant about making available to the average person who, now that marijuana is legal, there shouldn't be the same level of consequences to an individual who has a marijuana conviction in their background. The hope is that anyone and everyone who has a conviction in their background based on cannabis, what we would like for you to do is to reach out to us here at the Ant Mound Foundation. And what we're not able to do as a result of our partnership with New Leaf, we will ensure that you are put in front of the right people so that you get the information you need to see if you qualify for expungement. And if you do, we'll do our best to ensure that you have what you need in the form of support to help you with getting said record expunged if you do qualify.
Can I just stop you right there,
Yes,
Ann?
please.
And because the problem here is when the legislation regarding the expungements was introduced, it was supposed to be an automatic expungement for anyone that had cannabis related charges in their background. The fact that your organization, and I appreciate what you are doing, and anybody, if you know anybody, please reach out to Anthony McIntyre here at Ant Mound and New Leaf to have those expunged. But it should have been an automatic expungement, and they should have automatically had their charges reduced as part of that, because a lot of those were used as what's the right word, extenuating circumstances within their sentencing.
It was used to enhance
the enhancements, right?
Mhm.
So their sentences really need to be reduced. And we've had a lot of pushback from the State's Attorney Association because they want those sentences to stick, even though they know that they had been enhanced because of that marijuana conviction. So we have a problem here, and it really needs to be addressed. I'm asking everybody, reach out to the Lieutenant Governor's office because this falls under her purview, and it really should have been addressed way before now. We should not have to even spend $1 to have anybody's record expunged. It should have just been done automatically because what's right is right. And at the same time, these individuals who are in jail, because they had an ounce of weed, and here we are selling $1 million worth of it out here on the streets. It's just wrong. It is wrong on so many different levels.
True statement. And I think there's that thought process that, the fact that this was done, it makes somebody like pro drugs. And it's really weird to me, the hypocrisy that exists in this country sometimes with certain things that seemingly negatively affect one part of the community, but as soon as the playing field even remotely slightly gets leveled, it now becomes reverse racism or something, and that's a sad thing to me. But I do know that where these cannabis convictions are, I'm curious, do individual states attorneys have the ability, the authority on their own to reach back to past convictions in their particular counties and do exactly what you just said? Is there something that stops them from doing that?
No, there's nothing to stop them from doing that. They absolutely can be proactive and say, we want to work with this individual and reevaluate their case.
Mm.
But why would they? I mean, that would be the right thing to do, but
Yeah.
we don't always do what's right.
Well, my hope is that, like I said, with regards to George Floyd and, the dogs biting into women's legs and whatnot back in the 60s, maybe as a result of this engagement that you and I are having and putting this information out there for as many people to see as possible, maybe we'll embarrass the right person, maybe tap into his consciousness and make
Right.
him say, you know what, this is actually something that's worthwhile me taking a gamble, and I'm going to address it on my own. I don't need to necessarily publicize it, but I can easily assign someone in my office and tell them to go back and look at any convictions that where marijuana was an enhancement. And as a result of that, someone would most likely be home right now if it weren't for that marijuana enhancement. I think a person can do that right now quite easily. And I
Right.
think
But now,
maybe
as you mentioned
conversation.
earlier, there is an economic factor because God forbid that we have to reduce our prison population.
Mm,
So this is something that they really should have looked at when COVID first hit, because our prisons are overcrowded.
right.
The number of COVID related prison deaths is extremely high. And I'm just really worried about the number of lawsuits we're going to get in regard to that. The state is constantly paying lawsuits, which is taxpayer dollars just going down the drain and out the window.
Hmm.
Um, but this is a problem. It's, when they were looking at who to release regarding during the COVID, they should have looked at who had these who had these charges, remove those charges and move those individuals on home. But again, that would have been the right thing to do.
Outside of marijuana, I have just a couple more things and I'll let you go. So individuals who are incarcerated as a result of this bill, they now qualify for good time. Is that
We
accurate?
don't have good time. We have not, Art Turner, Representative Art Turner, former Representative Art Turner, he tried to restore the good time credit twice. I tried it once. We do not have good time credit.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yes.
Well, one of the things that you and I had talked about a while back was parole, and the fact that many people don't realize that this state doesn't have parole in the general sense of the word,
Right.
where the parole board decides, if you are to be released. We don't have that. Um,
Yeah.
and it's
I do
funny
have a
because,
bill. I've been running it for 3, 4 years, trying to
right.
bring back parole. We've started the conversation. It's a lot of education around it, just talking to other legislators, about why parole is so important. An individual's ability to prove that they have been rehabilitated, that they're not the same person that they were when they first went in. Because, studies have shown that, no, incarcerating somebody for long periods of time really does not reduce, their criminal inclinations. It just doesn't do that. People either have it in them to rehabilitate or they don't. And some people, you've got individuals who are serving life sentences and knowing that they're not going to get out, but yet they're using every second of every day, to better themselves,
Hmm.
even though they know that they're not going to get out. You have individuals who, are going to be out in 2 years who are doing everything except trying to better themselves. So
Right.
why would you not afford someone who probably is going to get out and become that contributing a citizen an opportunity to do so?
Absolutely. And I know this may not be politically correct for some. I'm not really concerned with it, but I'll give a couple of people who are examples of exactly what you're talking about. Who, which is Jeff Fort and Larry Hoover. So here you have two individuals that were charged with whatever they were charged with, and ha- in the case of Larry Hoover, he's been incarcerated since I was one. That was in 1973 that he went to prison. And it's like, at what point I wonder does this society say that a person has actually done their time, if you will? Like, at what point are you, to use that language that you use, rehabilitated?
Never.
At what point do you recognize? And I'm really quick, and I'll let this be my last comment. Um, our number one ally across the water is Israel. Israel has as what they consider to be their number one adversary, Hamas. Most of the leadership for Hamas is in their prisons in Israel. When they go to war on a cycle, which seems to be every 4 or 5 years, and they're doing what they're doing over there, the government of Israel, when it's time to close it, has no problem with going into the prisons and actually sitting down with that group, that leadership, because they know that they can influence what happens in the streets. It's just real. So if our number one ally, Israel, has it within themselves to do that very thing I just described, then it makes me wonder, why is it that the United States, who's so quick to say we'll do anything that we can to reduce crime and violence in our streets, but you have people who are incarcerated that you have the ability to go and talk to that can actually positively affect what's going on in the streets, and they won't do it. So when it comes to Illinois and the parole system, the parole board, I hope that when given an opportunity to, that this parole board will recognize that at some point in time, you need to let people go. They've done everything that they can to better themselves. And I think that you have to recognize that. So I appreciate everything that you've been doing to address criminal justice reform in the state of Illinois, Representative Mayfield. It's commendable. I'm all around the country talking about you.
Oh, thank you.
Seriously, like people who probably would never come to Illinois, they can always hit Google and hit a few buttons, and I make them aware of who you are and what you do. I don't even talk to you about this. I just do it because they say the true testament of how somebody carries you is how they talk about you when you're not present.
That's true.
So just know that you are a great example to a lot of people. It's very much appreciated. And we hope that you will continue to do exactly what you're doing, fighting the good fight for those who can't really fight for themselves. So I wanted
Yeah,
to
and
thank
I
you for
really
coming on with
appreciate
us.
that. Thank you so much. I'm trying. I'm really trying, to make a difference and to help others. So just thank you for those words. I
No
appreciate that.
worries. And if you have anything that you want to leave us with, this is your opportunity. Otherwise, we will let you go and to your next event because I know you got two more tonight.
I got one more tonight, one more, and
Do it.
it's a women's caucus, so it's okay. I get to, debrief with fellow legislators. But no, I just want to say to everyone, this was a great forum, and I want to thank Aunt Mound for putting this on, just to educate the community. If you have other questions, don't hesitate to reach out to my office. You know, this is, we're trying to educate, we're trying to grow, we're trying to rebuild our community, we're trying to make things better. And that's what this is all about, making a better community and a better society for our children and our children's children. So just thank you so much. RitaMayfield60.com is my website. Freedom 60th district at gmail.com is my email. 847-599-2800 is my phone number. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Representative Mayfield. We will most likely get a lot of questions coming in after this. I will make sure to forward those to you, or Leah will forward those to you. And if you want to get them put out, you'll just send us the answers back and we'll make sure that they get to whoever posed those questions. But again, appreciate you for coming on and educating the community on all that stuff that they need to know. We will talk to you soon.
Take care, everyone. Good
Bye.
night.